Hey everyone! Today, Rita and I are talking about menstrual care products. Now, this is a topic we are both very passionate in sharing about because it is still a taboo topic of conversation for many people. In this episode, we will discuss current products on the market, considerations when choosing or purchasing, the importance of caring for your vaginal microbiome and wound space, and we even discuss a couple studies that were done on tampons in 2024 with some very curious findings. Rita and I also get into what Ayurveda teaches us about supporting our natural menstrual flow, why certain products might actually be contributing to cramping and discomfort, and what we personally use and why. We hope this conversation gives you the full picture so you can make the choice that feels best for your body and your life. There are more options out there than most of us were ever taught, and we are here to walk you through them. Thanks so much for listening. We hope you enjoy this conversation.
Welcome to the Ayurveda for Women's Health podcast, where we simplify ancient Ayurvedic wisdom into practical guidance for everyday life. Between the overwhelming wellness trends, quick fixes, and conflicting health advice out there, we return to a science that has been around for thousands of years. I'm Rita, an Ayurvedic health counselor.
And I'm Brittni, an Ayurveda practitioner. In a world that disconnects us from our bodies, we are here to guide you back. Through body literacy, practical tools, and time-tested science, we will help you step boldly into a more empowered, aligned version of yourself. So let's dive in. This podcast is for educational purposes only and is not medical advice. Views expressed do not represent our employers.
So my kitchen smells so good right now. I just harvested a bunch of lemon balm and tulsi and mint yesterday. So it's like hanging in my dining kitchen area. And it's funny, I was thinking about the episode that aired today on Sattvarajas and Tamas, the Gunas of the Mind, and just how sattvic it can feel just smelling herbs. And as I was drying them and just like being covered in them, because it's such a messy process sometimes. And yeah, it just smells so good. I definitely am always talking about how I am not summer's biggest fan, but this part of summer of having that abundance of herbs and fresh food around, it's always feels like such a gift.
Yeah, it's so vibrant and it lasts so long, like into other seasons when you're harvesting it. What's your process for drying out your herbs and harvesting them?
Yeah, I'm still figuring that out and trying to work within our space, but I have an area, it's kind of like a darker area in my house that I've hung some string that I dry. And then I do have a dehydrator, so I do some herbs in there. Like, I think I was talking last time about all the wild strawberry leaf. Some of those I'll do in the dehydrator because it feels easier if I can't, the ones we can't hang. But yeah. How about you? Have you been
Cool.
doing any harvesting or making anything fun?
Yeah, we have. So we have an abundance of oregano and red raspberry here. So I've been harvesting that. I didn't plant it. It was here before we moved in. And every year it just seems to expand on where it grows. So you can probably see behind me a little bit. I have some oregano that I've been drying a bunch of oregano and hanging it and drying it out on the racks. I haven't used the dehydrator yet for the herbs. I'm just letting it air dry.
Yeah.
But I have used the dehydrator actually to make fruit leather from the raspberries.
Oh, fun.
And that's been really fun. So this is like the first year I tried doing that. And it's been really nice, like bring out on the trail with me and have like homemade dehydrated fruit leather, which is pretty cool. So yeah, kind of playing around with that. And then the raspberries are in abundance right now. So we had a bunch in our fridge that we picked this week, and I made some raspberry jam, which was it's always nice to have around, and it smells so good, tastes so good.
Yeah. Well, the other thing I made this weekend, actually, you'd appreciate this, is I think I told you a while back that my ferritin, my iron storage, was on the low side.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been working to get that up, and I found this recipe for essentially an iron boosting syrup. So I made a decoction with yellow dock and nettles and rose hips for the vitamin C to help with the iron absorption. And I put a little burdock root in it. And I feel like there's something else that I'm forgetting, but boiled that down into a decoction and then mixed it with molasses, which is really high in iron, and made an iron syrup out of it. So I've been adding a little bit of that to some different drinks and having it with certain meals to just help be able to work with and absorb the iron out of food a little bit better. So I'm excited to feel like it's a little bit of an experiment I'm running on myself to when I get my blood work done next to see how much that helps, because I did use a synthetic iron supplement for a bit and it helped, and my ferritin's in a better place. But yeah, I'm just interested now to see how the difference of doing it from the herbal way, which I imagine is just more bioavailable. I know a lot of people have a really hard time absorbing the iron from supplements.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and the syrup's a nice way to have it too, right? Instead of feeling like now have to like fit in all these herbs. And sometimes I think we can just be overwhelmed by the number of things we need to get into our bodies in a day. So I like having that syrup option. Sounds like a nice way to enjoy it, and probably tastes really good too.
Yeah. The molasses is kind of an interesting taste. My husband didn't love it because I think he's used to my elderberry syrup. And so he was excited and he was like, oh, this doesn't taste as good. But I think you could mix it with honey if you were trying to give it to kids or someone who was a little bit more particular on taste.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think that's actually really helpful leading into our conversation today, where we're actually talking about the blood and blood tissue and menstrual tissue. So yeah, very excited for this conversation. I know we were talking offline earlier before we hit record of how we're both very excited to have this conversation. So yeah, Rita, do you want to maybe give us a little intro into what we're talking about today?
Yeah, sure. So today we're talking about menstrual care options. And I think part of why I'm excited for this conversation is I think this definitely falls under those topics of things we just don't talk about enough. And I have a lot to say on this as well. Even before I ended up doing a fair amount of research on this topic and jumping into some science and some articles on what we know about menstrual care products and what we don't know about certain menstrual care products. So I'm excited to blend that with this Ayurvedic knowledge and what Ayurvedic physiology can also teach us about what menstrual care products work for us or perhaps maybe are working against us when it comes to menstrual health. And yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting time. I think we have more options than we've ever had before when it comes to menstrual care products. And I think that it's actually quite difficult to find menstrual care products that check all the boxes and are accessible and affordable and actually comfortable and work well for your menstrual needs and aren't wasteful and they're not toxic to our bodies, to the earth. So yeah, I'm excited to break this down further. And I think maybe what happens is people get into a habit of using a certain type of product and don't know what else is out there. So I'm excited to talk about some options today.
Yeah, I have so many thoughts on this already running through my mind. So I'm trying not to jump too far ahead, but I personally feel very passionate about having this conversation because it's something that I've seen from multiple different perspectives, both from a personal experience, my journey through exploring different menstrual care products, to working with clients in their journeys, and then also from a marketing background. A lot of my experience prior to Ayurveda was marketing. So we'll get into more of the details, but I think it is such an important aspect to address in our culture, where as women, how we are marketed to and how to care for this area of our body. And I think it is broadly overlooked in a lot of ways too, where if I think back to when I was first taught about pads and tampons, right? 30 years ago at this point. Certainly we've come a long way and having a lot more options now. But at the time, it was just kind of this mindset of, well, this is the norm and this is what you use. And then everyone just adopted that. And so I think to your point, Rita, we just kind of keep going with that and don't
Mhm.
really give it another thought. So I think it's something that's like broadly overlooked in options that are available, and also how we are taking care of that area. We're taking care of our whole vaginal microbiome, like we're going to talk about, and we're taking care of our womb space and that tissue that's very highly sensitive and responsive to the things that we are putting near it or putting on it. So I'm so excited to be having this conversation. And I know my husband's in a meeting in the other room, and I told him that I was going to keep my voice down, but I don't know if I can because I'm very excited. So yeah, I truly feel very passionate about this because I think that it is a conversation that may help a lot of people have a deeper relationship with their womb space.
Mm.
And I think that really is at the heart of what the work that you and I both are doing with our clients and in this podcast space. So yeah, not to get like too far into the weeds, but there's so many tangents I could go on already
Yeah.
in there.
No, I'm with you, and I really like how you said that last part about how this is a lot more than just finding the menstrual product that works with you. It's really changing this relationship that we have with our cycles. And yeah, thinking back to when I was first learning about pads and tampons and how secretive that was, and how you were like hiding tampons in your sleeve when you went to the bathroom. And it was this very non-spoken thing that you and I were talking a little bit about the history of menstrual products before we hit record, and how in many ancient and indigenous cultures all over the world, menstruation was considered sacred and powerful and really treated with reverence. And menstruating women would retreat to a separate lodge or tent and meditate and rest and reflect. And it was really considered this time of heightened clarity and spiritual connection. And these women would record their dreams and their insights, and the elders would seek their guidance on crops and hunting and community disputes. And yeah, and then, patriarchy and patriarchal cultures took over, and really over time, menstruation became thought of as gross and dirty. And I think that there's still a lot of that feeling there around cycles being dirty, and just wanting to find a menstrual care product that can kind of make me not think about it, or make it kind of go away, or make me be able to move through my day with the most efficiency. And I get that. I'm somebody who's like out there working in the world, and there are those days where, yeah, like we need to find products that work for our lifestyle. But I think that connecting with our womb, connecting with our blood, I'm here for that, and I'm here for helping more women do that. And yeah, I think this conversation's like a drop in the bucket of that, but I'm excited about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's such an important aspect of not just our physical body, but our emotional body.
Yeah.
And I think that we really, as a culture, don't give it the attention that it deserves. It is such a powerful center of who we are. And it's not really honored in the way that we're going to go through some of these options that are actually causing more harm for this very sacred center of our being.
Yeah.
And I mean, hopefully this conversation helps shift some of those available perspectives on why this is so important to care for intentionally.
Well, and I might add a quick tangent on that topic you just said before we jump in. So a personal experience with that, in maybe trying to remember exactly how long ago this was, but sometime within the last few months, I did this program. It was teaching you self-practice of inner pelvic myofascial release. And I was really drawn to it. I was really excited to learn it, to try it. And it was essentially an online class where we all had our Zoom cameras off, and the instructor, Lindsay Corcel, was instructing us on how to do the maneuver. And then towards the end, we put our cameras back on and people shared. And I remember feeling a little bit disappointed in that moment, because people were sharing some pretty significant physical release that they felt. And I didn't really feel anything physical. And I wasn't having like pain in that area or known tension in that area. I was just really curious about the practice. But I remember feeling really disappointed that, oh, everyone had this kind of experience and I really didn't. It felt fairly neutral for me. And then really within a couple days, I had this wild boost of creativity and clarity on areas where I had felt kind of stuck and blocked and confused. And in my mind, there's no doubt that there's a connection between those two. And so I share that because I think to what you were just describing, I think, yeah, we need to think about our womb and our pelvic space as very important on a physical perspective, but it is connected to our creativity. It is connected to our ability to create in this world. And yeah, this like goes far beyond the physical.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great example. I'm really glad that you went there.
Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's maybe get into more of the specifics and to understand this area a little bit more. I think we also want to talk about the vaginal microbiome, and there's so much conversation about the gut microbiome. You could say those words and everyone would have an idea of what you're talking about and have those flag words of different types of bacteria that you might find in the gut. And we also want to recognize that the vaginal canal also has its own microbiome that's separate from your gut microbiome. But if we think about anatomically where they are in the body, they're very connected. So I've even had clients that have had disruption in the vaginal area, like UTI, and their digestion has been really off, right? So that is very closely connected where you might experience like one and then the other or vice versa, or at the same time. So not overlooking it as this, it's almost like the way that's talked about in our culture. It's just like, here's this little box and we put it over here and we don't really think about it until we're bleeding. And then we put stuff in it to catch all the blood. And then we go back to doing all these other things. So I think really opening that up as a part of the whole anatomy and understanding its place in the ecosystem of how the body's operating can help us understand how to take care of it in a way that feels more balanced and aligned for us. It's part of the whole system. So it's not this like separate thing that just operates when you bleed. And with that, the microbiome, it's dynamic, right? In the same way that our gut is dynamic, it's responding to what we're putting in. It's responding to external factors. It's responding to our nervous system. We want to think about the womb space as also being responsive to hormonal fluctuations and physiological changes and different ages. It can also be impacted by stress and like other external factors. So really highlighting why this conversation is important is because it's not this simplified area of the body that we've been taught. It is very dynamic and very responsive to other factors and other interactions.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that when we're thinking about the vaginal microbiome and thinking of that part of the body, we're thinking about the mucosa there specifically. And you alluded before about how absorbent our vaginal mucosa is. It's different than the skin on our arms or our legs, which it's important to think about what we're putting on that as well. But it's a very vascular area. There's a lot of blood vessels. And so I think it brings that extra level of importance that whatever we're putting on that area or in that area is something that has the strong potential to be absorbed into the body. And it's different than when we consume something and eat something and then it gets processed through the digestive tract and the liver. When we're absorbing something systemically into the body from the vagina, it's different. It doesn't have those stopgaps, so to speak. So with that, it brings me to thinking about tampons. And, we're going to go through each of these different types of menstrual care products. But tampons, like we said earlier, I think is what most of us have used if we're not still currently using them. And Ayurvedic physiology has some really interesting things to say when we're thinking about tampons. But I wanted to start with just what we know currently in modern research. And maybe a more accurate way to say that is what we don't know and what hasn't been researched. I did a little bit of a deep dive here, and I found a study that came out of the University of California, Berkeley, back in 2024. And essentially what they did is they tested 24 different tampons across 14 different brands for the presence of heavy metals. And surprisingly, not surprisingly, this was the first study to ever do this. There were some other studies that were looking at other chemicals in these menstrual care products. This is the first one that ever looked at the presence of heavy metals. And personally, I found the results fairly alarming. So they tested for 16 different types of heavy metals, and they tested tampons that were purchased in the United States, in Europe, organic, non-organic. And across all of the tampons they tested, they contained 12 out of the 16. All tampons contained 12 of the 16 of these heavy metals. And most alarming was lead, and that all of these tampons contained lead, and higher quantities of lead. So there was one brand in particular that had 120 parts per billion of lead in one tampon. And while the EPA and the World Health Organization says there's no safe exposure level with lead, in a single bottle of water, there's an allowance for 5 parts per billion. And in some of these tampons, there was 120 parts per billion in one tampon. So it's 24 times the amount in the water bottle. And the organic brands had less of that. They had less of the lead. There were higher levels of arsenic in the organic brands, which is kind of interesting. There's some different theories on that. So yeah, I mean, I think it stirred up a lot of alarm. When I was reading about this, I was seeing that apparently there were some TikTok trends of like women throwing away their tampons and, all of this kind of backlash that came. But what came from that is that the FDA and different researchers were saying, well, this is proving that there are these heavy metals in the tampons. It's not proving that that's being absorbed and released into the body, which is very fair and very accurate to say. And so the FDA, fortunately, was really reactive to this. They did a lit review. There wasn't a lot in the lit review because there's not a lot of research on this. And they did a counter study where they essentially tried to replicate a vagina and replicate vaginal fluid. And so they inserted these tampons that they also tested and also found levels of these heavy metals, these different carcinogens that were in there, lead, like I said, arsenic, etc. And essentially in the study where they had the tampons in these fluids that were simulating the vaginal fluid and they heated it up to simulate a vagina, and they did not find that the lead was leaking out into the fluid. So no changes were made from this 2024 study. The brands were kept fully anonymous. There still is not a requirement for third-party testing for presence of these metals because it's thought and understood that even though there are lead and other materials that, again, are determined that there's no safe levels once absorbed in the body, the thought is that it's not actually getting absorbed into the body. And yeah, I guess I'll leave that there and I'll let people draw their own conclusions. I appreciate this is more in the weeds than we normally get on this podcast, but I really just wanted to bring conversation and awareness and discussion and request for more research on these products that so many of us have been using for so many years without full awareness of what could possibly be in these products that we're using in this really intimate and really absorbent part of our body. And yeah, I think it's beyond the heavy metals too. It's things like phthalates and plastic and fragrance, which has been shown to be an endocrine disruptor, and just really raising the question of what is in these products. And yeah, I think we need a lot more conversation, a lot more research. And so I wanted to bring it into this episode today.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of thoughts on this, but I guess my first takeaway is that you're challenging us to be curious about why is this the norm? And I think that's like the bigger conversation where it's like, yeah, why is it acceptable? And I think to your point, that's why we're having this conversation, so that anyone who's choosing to decide can decide with all the facts that they have. And I guess a couple points that come to mind from the study you shared, like 2024.
Yeah.
Like we are halfway through 2026. how long was I mean, I haven't used tampons or pads in 8 years, baby. Like, it's been a long time. But prior to that, I mean, I had been using them for 15, 20 years, probably. I forget exactly when I started my bleed, but yeah, like say like 12 to 32.
Yeah.
That's a lot of years to kind of risk it. So yeah, just highlighting the fact that 2024 is when this study was actually done. Still have not disclosed the companies, right? And then also, you mentioned in the study that some were non-organic and some were organic. So are we saying that, like, okay, organic lead, like organic arsenic, good to go? Like, no, and I'm joking with that, but I think that's a really important call out. And I'll talk about this more because from a marketing perspective, like, we are being taught natural, plant-based. Okay, is one thing in this whole ingredients list, this whole manufacturing list, true for that? And that way they can put it on the box that everything is, right? It's just like misconception in marketing. And I think that is something that is so important to start to understand, because the way that we are marketed to with everything, with food, with medicine, with body products, with hair care, marketing, you really need to pay attention to it. And I feel really grateful that I have a background in marketing because I understand how it works. I don't think all marketing is bad. I think we need to understand how it works, though, and how you can be very targeted, especially when it comes to, like, quote, organic and natural products, like tampons. Because to your point, Rita, with this study that you shared, even the organic tampons had lead and arsenic in them.
Yeah.
So that's very deceiving.
Yeah. And I think just to make sure we're telling all sides of the story, so to speak, part of how this study has been interpreted is that there's this understanding that these metals and ingredients that are toxic to us, especially in higher quantities, they are naturally found in our earth. Like, lead is naturally present in the earth's crust, and arsenic occurs from weathering rocks and so on. And so we know that there are lead and arsenic and so on in our soil and therefore in our food, but the quantities of that have absolutely increased with pesticides and fertilizers and mining practices and gasoline usage and all of these things. And so it's always hard for me to have these conversations. I'm not trying to be a conspiracy theorist. Like, I'm someone who believes in science, and I also am someone who believes in questioning things that we have been told our whole lives. And I just want to be clear, I'm not saying I think that these ingredients and that tampons by themselves are the cause of all of these women's health issues that we are seeing in surplus currently. But I'm more just pointing out that I think that the ingredients in these products have been underdisclosed and understudied, and to your point, marketed in a way where this isn't common knowledge. And I don't think most women have thought about the need to be particular in their brand choice, in if they're buying organic or non-organic and so on. And so, yeah, I just think it's worth having the conversation.
Right. Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think it's I don't know. I guess we went into the weeds, but I feel like there's more weeds we could go into with it. But yeah, I think it's a hard balance to strike, right? And I think we're kind of like set up against a system that, like, this is how it operates, right? And there's just certain standards that it follows that we don't always have like time or energy to follow the path of them. And I think that's part of the larger problem of how our culture is kind of burning us out from an energy perspective, where we like don't have the time to go down these rabbit holes of research. But I mean, hopefully this helps shed some light on, like, okay, maybe there is another option that would feel more supportive in this situation. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's tricky. I think I don't want people to feel like, oh, now I have no options. Like, what do I do? This, like, now this feels scary or overwhelming, right? We're going to keep talking about some other things that may feel helpful and just give other perspective on options to use.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally am with you. I never want to be that person that's just like stirring up more fear. Because at the end of the day, we've talked on this podcast before, but it all comes down to that we have to support our body's ability to detox, because we know that there are so many toxic chemicals that are just abundantly dispersed in our clothing and our skincare products, in the soil, like it's in the air, it's everywhere at this point. And I think that there's only so much we can do, but I do think it's important that we're finding that balance of making informed decisions while we're also continuing to hold corporations responsible for having some things in place where the focus can't just be how can I make more money, but how can I make money while ensuring that my products are safe for humans and the earth.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, I can stop.
No, I think it's good. Yeah, I think it's good. But maybe let's move into, I don't know, anything else on the tampon piece that we didn't talk about?
Well, I think we should talk about what Ayurveda can teach us about tampons. I don't know if maybe you want to go into that piece of how Ayurvedic physiology can weigh in there, even though, of course, we didn't have tampons back when the Ayurvedic texts were written. But
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So the way that we would think about menstruation, or the way that Ayurveda shares perspective on menstruation and how to best care for that flow, is that the body is working really hard to move out that blood, essentially is what's happening during menstruation, right? The uterus is having contractions to push that blood out and to clear the endometrial lining and release it from the body. So there's this like natural cleansing process that happens, and there's this natural downward flow process that happens. And so in Ayurveda, we refer to that as a panavayu. It's this downward moving energy. And so obviously today is a little bit different in how, when the texts were written, how our lifestyles might impact that downward flow. But Ayurveda really teaches that the importance of honoring this energetic shift that's happening in the body. And so if we're doing anything or inserting anything that is creating a blockage of that flow, we are restricting the natural movement of blood and of energy out of the body. And so that can lead to having more discomfort during menstruation because that downward and outward flow is being blocked. So something like a tampon, for example, can create more constriction and more tightening and more discomfort and more pain, perhaps even in the womb space. So this apanavayu is something that Ayurveda teaches us to really honor at this time of menstruation, so that we're in a place of ease, and the body is in this place of ease where we're not creating other instances where the body feels blocked or restricted from allowing this flow to happen. And so when we talk about this in other aspects, even I'm very often having clients, I'm telling them avoid abhyanga at this time because the body needs to digest that oil. And so even with like heavy foods or doing kind of adding anything to the body or to the systems of the body that are going to take energy away from the womb space and from the uterus. So I like to think about it that way. Whereas if I'm eating like really heavy foods or like really greasy foods or hard to digest foods around that time of menstruation, I'm taking energy away from the womb space to be able to do what it's really trying to focus on. So thinking about it from an energy perspective, I think is helpful. So yeah, going back to the abhyanga, our body has to digest that oil, right? We're adding it to the tissues. Our Agni is usually lower during menstruation too, because again, energy is somewhere else. Energy is really in this like focused area of the body. So digestion is lower, our energy is lower, right? We're experiencing these other signs that the body may be asking you to slow down and to honor this process that's much larger process that's happening.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was thinking of kind of a practical example for understanding Apanavayu. So a yoga pose, an asana that I utilize a lot when I'm on my period is Supta Baddha Konasana, where you're laying on your back, your soles of your feet come together and your knees are spread in sort of like a butterfly position. And the reason that that's utilized in your period is because it does support that down and out flow. I've had experiences before where I'll start noticing some cramps coming on. And if I'm home and I can lay down and get into that position, it's pretty fascinating because I'll feel the increase of blood flow just being in that position. And oftentimes that will remediate the cramping. And so I think that's this really clear example in my mind of, okay, the cramping is happening because the flow is getting a little bit blocked. And then when I'm able to get my body into a position where the blood can flow more easily, then that cramping gets remediated. So one, I wanted to throw that out there because I think that's a really good pose for people to utilize when they're bleeding. But also, I think just to get that vision of Apanavayu a little bit more.
Yeah, and we always, and Ayurveda always teaches that whenever there's pain, there's stagnation. So to your point, you're kind of creating more space in that area to allow that blood to flow more easily. And if we think about if I'm on my bleed and I'm sitting at my desk all day, my hips are tight, right? My womb space is tight. I'm really kind of restricting that flow. That can create more discomfort. So yeah, there's certainly ways that Ayurveda teaches to like lay on the floor. We were talking about earlier is like lay on the floor and let the body do what it's doing, right? Without kind of interfering with it. I think that's the big thing.
Yeah.
Not always possible 100% to that, but versions of that may be possible for you maybe in small doses. Certainly we've talked about this before, how we really would like to advocate for, or we do advocate for menstrual day off, or menstrual leave. So this is why, because the body is doing a lot, or it's like working really hard. The uterus itself, if we think about it, it's this like huge muscle and it's contracting, and that's good. It's a good thing. If it didn't contract, that blood would just stay there. It wouldn't really leave in an efficient way. And so thinking about the tissues and thinking about what it's doing and that contraction and that flowing, it really is a lot for the body to do. And we've talked about this before on our past menstrual cycle episodes. We go into the different phases of the menstrual cycle on episodes 6, 7, and 8. We have 3 whole episodes on this in much more detail. But the uterus can expand up to 3 times the size. That's a lot of blood, and that's a lot of pressure on other organs and other areas in the body. So not to go too far into that, I think it is worth noting in this conversation of how we are taking care of that womb space at that time is where we're not overloading the body, right? We're not over exercising because that can create more pressure and more heaviness, especially if the uterus is full of blood and trying to expel it. And gentle practices that are supporting the down and out flow. And sometimes that just looks like laying down, right? Sometimes that doesn't look like an action other than being present with yourself. So
Yeah, and also bringing it back to the menstrual care products, being aware of how certain products like tampons can block that flow. The other menstrual care product that comes to mind there are menstrual cups and discs. I used a menstrual cup for probably 2 years, and there were some aspects of it that I really loved. And, I think from an ecological standpoint, you can use the same cup for years. Like there's not a lot of waste. It's made out of silicone, so it's, it doesn't have, at least to my knowledge, probably hasn't been studied, but at least to my knowledge, it's safer in that way. You can keep it in for longer periods of time. What I really liked about it is it allows you to see your blood. When you think about how in Ayurveda, and we talk a lot in that menstrual series that we did about how the different color and quantity and quality of the blood can give you so much information as to what's going on inside in your constitution. Seeing it in the menstrual cup, it's a really easy way to work with it. And you can do that with other methods. But yeah, just like really calling out, I understand why people are really drawn to them. My recommendation is often if someone is using a menstrual cup and they're having indications of blocked Apanavayu, so they're having those cramps, they're having maybe lower back pain, it can also be an indication there, then I encourage women to do an experiment. on themselves and to take at least a few cycles off from using the cup and off from having something where it's blocking that flow. And we'll talk about what some of those other options could be and seeing if you notice a difference with those symptoms. And I do think that, everyone's different and there could be other reasons for sure for those symptoms. But I do think that that's a good place to start if you're having those symptoms.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking from experience, I started using a cup probably about 8 years ago, and it was a few years ago I stopped using it, and I noticed a reduction in my cramps. And I used to have dysmenorrhea pretty severely, and I was like trying to think of like, oh, why did this one feel better? And that was the one change I made, was not using a cup. I just free bleed, and now I free bleed every single time, and I love it. But that was, I noticed that right away, and I was like, that's really interesting. And that was kind of before I knew the Ayurvedic perspective of that, like supporting the down and out, that Apana Vayu. So yeah, try it and see what you notice.
Yeah.
It seems
for sure.
subtle, but I think it really can have an impact.
Yeah. And maybe I'll just add one last caveat that if you are using a cup, then making sure it's one that is a good fit, because we're all very different in our size and our shape. And I think that if you have one that's not the best fit and it's applying that extra pressure along the wall, then that I think can be just something we want to be really mindful of. So yeah, it's something where, again, I understand all the reasons people love them. Clearly, I was more candid on my thoughts about tampons, but I think when it comes to menstrual cups, it's more just encouraging people to be curious and experiment for sure.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I guess the other option to think about would be pads. So, do you use pads? What is your take on pads?
So my period care is very different if it's a hospital day versus a home day. So I do 2 10s at a hospital and it's an hour commute. So I have these 2 marathon days a week that it can be 12-hour days. And then my other days are my Ayurveda business days. So it's much more of a flexible schedule and I'm home. And so when I'm home, I use period underwear. I oftentimes will work from the couch in that Supta Baddha Konasana. It's a lovely experience. When I'm in the hospital and I have one of those heavy bleed days that aligns with that, those days I use period underwear and I do use some disposable pads. I have reusable ones too. I love them from an ingredient standpoint and from a reusable standpoint. I have yet to find ones that don't move around. So yeah, my typical is that I'll wear a disposable pad on top of the period underwear, and then be able to, when that gets filled, just have the period underwear there for the rest of the day, because it's just too long of a day to go with just the period underwear alone.
Yeah, that's helpful. I'm sure a lot of people can resonate with that balance, like which day it makes sense and which day you have the ability to be more flexible.
Yeah.
That's important.
Yeah, because I think at the end of the day, like you mentioned, free bleeding, I think once women try that, I think they love that. I think it just comes down to so many people don't have bathroom autonomy throughout the day. And I think of teachers who are always telling me that they're really limited with when they can use the restroom, or maybe people work in home care and they're driving throughout the day. I just think that is really what this conversation comes down to, is that, again, we just need to have menstrual care leave where you can stay home a day and work from home a day.
Yeah.
But
right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think we have to pick our battles of what is possible and what we can choose at different times. And it's hard. It's really hard. I just want to validate that for people that are trying to navigate this and looking for an option that feels more supportive. And I wish we could change our system. Maybe
we can. It's just taking time.
Yeah. We're working on it. But yeah, I think pads, to me, I think my preference would be for pads versus tampons, because again, there is a little bit more space between. There's not direct contact all the time with that really sensitive absorbent tissue like you're describing earlier. So I think that pads can offer some of that breathing room that tampons don't really have. So that could be a consideration in making a choice. But something that we have talked about before, there is caution around the herbal pads that are advertised out there, right? Again, marketed as being natural or possibly organic, and speaking to people like us, right? That would be considering those factors when we are purchasing a product or deciding between brands. And I do want to caution on those because, again, one, I would be curious, what is the sourcing of those herbs? And then two, thinking about essential oils are so potent. So potent. And we've talked about this even like in clinical before, where there are certain oils too that are extremely potent in essential oil form. And think about putting that next to the most sensitive skin and tissue on your body.
It's intense.
It's really intense. It's like a very aggressive way to put herbs onto your vagina. So yeah, go ahead. I know you have some thoughts.
Well, I have some experience. So yeah, it was like a few years ago, maybe it was like 4 years ago. And I was at the store. It was like I emergently ran out of pads, went to the store to get some. And I saw these herbal pads. And I'm like, oh, aloe, rose, lavender, like cooling. This sounds nice for my pedicycles. Like, yeah, I'll try this. Bought them on a whim. Holy moly. Intense. Like, probably should have looked at the ingredients before I tried it, but ended up seeing it had menthol in it as well. It was intense, of just like this tingling sensation that was an immediate no for me. That, yeah, I think I am just echoing everything you just said, that I think essential oils are really cool and really powerful, but when we work with them on the skin, we only do that within a carrier oil, right? So the thought of having that on a pad and the menthol piece, and yeah, I think it's an interesting concept. I think it's something to be cautious with.
Right. Yeah. 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 That's a good example, right? If we're using a carrier oil that has more potent herbs in it, it's in such a small form. And then the carrier oil really is the one that is in abundance, right? That's the one that makes up the majority of what's going on in your skin. And then the essential oil is just like a little bit of it, or the other herbs are a little bit of it. So it's more condensed into a digestible, healthy, safe form. The essential oils are just like really can be so harmful. And to take that further, not just say harmful, but like they can impact the tissue and the quality of the tissue, right? So they are, if we think about, even if you were to like open up an essential oil bottle and you smelled it, it's really strong, right? It kind of like makes you take a step back and think about that, the aroma of that even going into that area of your body, like into that womb space. It's just really intense. It's like shocking for that tissue. And we already know it's a sensitive tissue.
Yeah.
So yeah, caution with those. I'm like, oh, are we leaving any good options for people to use?
I know, right? Well, we haven't, we're going to talk about, we still have that to come, period underwear. But yeah, no, I just was going to add in there, I think using herbal care for vaginal care, there's a lot of options there, right? We think about sitz baths or certain suppositories and things like that. But I think that's a really different experience than, yeah, I had such a negative experience with those. So,
yeah.
But yeah, I think to your point, let's talk about some options of what we are recommending, because there's nothing worse than listening to a podcast where everyone's like, this is bad and this is bad and this is bad. Like, we should probably bring it back to
we got
some better things. Yeah, we got you guys.
Well, yeah, period underwear. So I love period underwear. There are, with anything, like filter through the marketing and make sure you're understanding the source and the resourcing of it. So we're not having like PFAs and we're having organic cotton. So looking for the things that feel safe on your body. And if there is transparency in the marketing and with the brands about what is in the product or what is not in the product. So you just want to make sure that they are doing those third-party testing like we were talking about with the other products. But period underwear can be a great option where it gives you a little bit more breathing room than some of the other things we've talked about. I think the concern can be like if it's leaking or how it fits. And in my experience, I sometimes use period underwear and sometimes I just use my regular underwear and then wash them. So depending on how heavy my flow is or like what time of the flow, if it's the beginning or the middle or the end, that's worked for me. I tend to have a lighter flow than other people I've talked to. I know, Rita, you said you have a heavier flow and that wouldn't work for you. So I get that too. But I think it's helpful to know that you could do that certain times, right? I even think about using a tampon in the past when it's such a minimal flow or it's like the tail end and there's just a little bit and it feels like dry, right? Because when we are bleeding, it's actually our dry time of the month. It's our vata time. It's not juicy. It's not easy to like put a tampon in necessarily. So the period underwear, that can be a nice space to use that when that flow is kind of fluctuating and maybe it's starting to get lighter or it hasn't quite increased yet. So I've really loved using period underwear and I've been using them for a while. And then sometimes I just free bleed if I can, and even at night I'll sleep with a towel underneath me, and it's worked out. So I really enjoy it.
Yeah. Yeah. So when we first started talking about doing this episode, Brittni asked me what menstrual care products I used, and I asked her the same. And that was her first answer. It's like, well, sometimes I use period underwear. Sometimes I just bleed into my regular underwear. I was like, we have very different periods. That would not work for my body. I mean, but I think to your point, like the very tail ends, I think that you make a good point that sometimes people will like keep using a cup or keep using a tampon. But yeah, I think that really, if I had to summarize what we're getting at is I think the main thing that we want people to have caution around is how it's feeling for them if they are using something that they're inserting, whether it's a tampon, a cup, a disc, and to be curious and experiment with trying what you've called free bleeding of like not having something that's blocking that flow there. And I think depending on who you are, yeah, maybe that is like into your regular underwear, into a towel, into period underwear, or I guess I don't know what the actual definition of free bleeding is. If I guess pads wouldn't be considered part of that. I'm not sure.
That's a good question. I didn't think so. Is my inkling that it's not considered free bleeding, but that is a good question.
But I think, like, personally for me, there are just situations when I have my 12-hour days that it's like, I can't bring multiple pairs of period underwear with me at that pace of the job. I'm like up on the floor. Like, it's not going to work well for me. So I think it's always figuring out what's going to work best for you. But I think really, again, that point of, well, if you are home, can you switch it up? Can you experiment? Can you try those different things? And I think the other piece of that is one thing I don't think I mentioned when I was doing this deep dive of research. I actually am feeling really inspired of how many women-led businesses are coming to light and are creating new products that essentially their business formed really organically from the problems that we're talking about and from not being able to find products that were a fit. And I think we are seeing a lot of changes with period underwear in that sense. And I guess one thing I also wanted to add in what you were saying about period underwear, just to be fully transparent, especially with how hard I came for tampons, is that period underwear, the majority of them do have plastic in them. That's what keeps it being leak proof. And it's more looking at the covering being that organic cotton. And I do think there are some out there that use bamboo and like some other ingredients that I've been seeing. But I guess the way that I want to land in this conversation is that I don't think there are options out there if you have a heavier flow, if you're out there working the day-to-day, that's going to check every single box. I wanted this conversation more to be just this opportunity to pause and reflect on what is out there, what we're using, and how that feels in our body.
Yeah, that's a really important clarification because everyone between you and I, we have very different flows, right? And so everyone has very different flow and different needs. And I think that it's helpful to understand what options are available so you can make the decision that feels best and most aligned for you. Yeah. Because I just think that is usually not the conversation that's being had, right? It's kind of like we're kind of forced into these products at a young age, and then we don't really have the time or brain space to like question them, which I think is part of the problem. So hopefully this conversation helps bring that pause. We're always going to have the option to hit pause on something and reevaluate. How does this actually feel for me? Is this something that I've just adopted over time and not thought about? Or is this something that really is aligned with who I am and how I want to be right now? Because that can change and evolve as we learn more and we grow more, and it's always changing. So this can be one of those opportunities to explore this area of your body and the space of your body and what options are available in a way that do feel helpful for how you want to care for your vaginal canal and your womb
Mm-hmm.
space and
Mm-hmm.
that really, sensitive tissue of the body.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, and I think certainly if this has piqued interest or more questions, possibly, I would go back and listen to those other 3 episodes that we talked about menstruation and the phases and care for menstruating, episodes 6, 7, and 8. That's a great place to start to just kind of explore where you're at right now and like how it feels in your life right now. Because I know I've gone through many iterations of
Mm-hmm.
connecting with my menstruation and my cycle. And I think it's something that's ever evolving and ever changing. Yeah, I think being able to like move with that is an important piece of it, and
Mm-hmm.
finding what feels good for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I think maybe a special call out for episode 8, the third one in that series, because that does get into menstrual imbalances and like really extreme symptoms that so many of us experience on our bleed. And I was thinking about that when we were talking about these different options, is perhaps if someone's having like really big blood clots, and then they might be like, well, period underwear isn't an option for me because it's not going to absorb those clots. And I think if that's the case, then we want to have a deeper conversation and look and see if we can make some changes in the body to support a healthier fluid and healthier blood. So I do think that if there are certain period options that don't feel accessible to you because of certain factors of your bleed, some of that, like we said, I have a heavier bleed than Brittni, but then some of that can be in an imbalanced state that we can definitely address in Ayurveda.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. Yeah, I think the theme here is to get curious about it and what it means for you. And just to add like the marketing perspective, I think we just need to ask these questions more, right? And I think that we just need to have a little bit more awareness of what's possible out there on these products and what we're being sold to. Because at the end of the day, there's a lot of big name brands and corporations and systems that are not looking out for our well-being. And I think there are also a lot of companies that are,
Yes.
and finding those ones and supporting those, like your money is going somewhere, and do you know where it's going, right?
Yeah.
Who is it supporting? So I think a much broader topic, but something to consider when we are making purchases that affect our womb, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's all connected to how we're living and the lifestyle that we have.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
I know I shared a lot of opinions today. I hope I didn't scare anyone off.
Me too. I mean, yeah, I think that's part of this. I think that's honestly like a healthy place for us to get to as a world, though, is being able to hear other people's
Mm.
opinions that you don't agree with and being like, all right, cool. I'm still going to use tampons, but
Mm-hmm.
like you made me think about that a little bit or
Sure.
whatever it may be. I know you and I have talked before about not feeling afraid to be honest and also
Mm-hmm.
a full awareness that there could have been something that we'll misspeak on or that we're not looking at the whole picture, that there's another perspective. And I think that's just the purpose of the human experience, is to have
Mm-hmm.
dialogue and to learn and expand what we know. I think you said on an episode recently that like you don't know what you know until you know it. So
Mm-hmm.
I think all we can do is share the knowledge that we have currently and
Mm-hmm.
have these conversations. And I think as women, let's just talk about our periods more and the products we're using and what we like and what we don't like. And
Yeah.
maybe if you have a company that you really love, just send that group text to all
Yeah.
your friends and be like, hey, I love these period underwear in case anyone's looking for some. And maybe that's something I'll do in our Patreon on this episode, is I'll share some of the brands that I found that I like too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's so much to say on it. And I think we've mentioned this a few times on other episodes. We're like, check back and listen to our podcast in 5 years or 10 years and like
Sure.
see how it's evolved. And yeah, I think I'm really excited to share what we know now. And I'm sure we'll keep sharing as we learn more and more.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Totally. Well, we hope that this was helpful. Hopefully, people learned something new from it. And if nothing more, you now know how Brittni and I feel about tampons.
Yeah.
But also no judgment. It's like we're all trying to figure things out with the best information we have.
Yeah. You do you.
You do you. You do you.
Thanks, Rita.
Yeah. Thanks, Brittni.
If you enjoyed today's episode, it would mean the world to us and help support our work if you'd like, share, leave a review, as well as subscribe to our podcast on whichever platform you use. If you're looking for more connection or would like to support this podcast, we'd love to have you join our Patreon for $5 a month. Here you'll get bonus episodes and access to our community chat Q&A.
And don't forget to check out our wellness library, which is filled with self-guided classes, kitchen tutorials, herbal recipes, and more Ayurvedic practices, all for just $5 a month. Thanks so much for being here with us. Until next time, be well.